Thank you for joining us. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis, along with Devin DeCuna, who's joining us as a co-host today. And today we're going to be talking about kids. That's right, children. What is it like to raise children in a world like today? With so many choices, it seems kids are scattered and kind of lose a little bit of focus here and there, but we kind of wonder, is it because of our parents? Are they just not keeping the kids focused? On the program today, we have someone that says, well, that's probably what it is. Your kids are your own fault is the title of the book, and joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today is our guest, Mr. Larry Winget. Larry, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You bet. And Devin, you're still out there, right?
Yep.
Now, what I really like about this is the title really hits on a point that I've been seeing over the last 15 to 20 years, especially maybe here in America, is that there seems to be a lack of personal responsibility for outcomes. Tell us about that.
Well, there's a lack of responsibility that's prevalent throughout society. That's pretty much the whole problem with the way things are today. We've got a sense of entitlement that people owe us everything, and that's just not the case. We have to be responsible for our actions. We have to be responsible and accept the consequences of our actions. And sadly, people aren't willing to do that, and the point of my book is that's not what we're teaching our children as well.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Larry. Sometimes when I notice when little kids are out in public, sometimes they misbehave, throw tantrums, create a scene, and their parents just stand there like nothing is happening. And my question to you is, do moms and dads naturally know how to parent their children?
I think they do naturally know that that is bad behavior. I don't think they naturally know always what to do about it, and so sometimes they react in negative ways, and that's when we see the parents scream and jerk them up and do all those kind of things. You know, really it all comes down to good communication. We have to understand, first of all, and nothing bugs me more than parents who watch their kids and little kids who act horrible when out in public. Boy, it bothers me. But that is a parenting issue, and when you communicate in advance what you expect from your child, my dad always said, look, we're about to go in there. This is the way you need to act, and if you don't act, you and I are going to have go outside and have a little talk. And if you communicate in advance what you expect from your children, communicate the consequences of not giving you what you expect, then it's really pretty a simple process.
In the book, you say our kids are a mess. They are over-medicated, over-indulged, overweight, over-entertained, undereducated, underachieving, underdisciplined, disrespectful, illiterate brats with a sense of entitlement that is crippling society. Wow.
Boy, it bothers people when I say that, but they rarely have a good argument to come back with me.
Yeah, I mean,
because it's just true.
Yeah, I mean, that's a little harsh, don't you think?
No, I just think it's accurate. I could say that in a lot nicer words, and people would say, well, yeah, that's true. Okay, are kids overweight? Absolutely. You know, that cannot be argued. Are kids over-medicated? There's no argument there. Nobody can find a statistic that wouldn't tell me that's true. Are they overindulged? Oh, come on. When you see 6-year-olds carrying a cell phone, that's called overindulged. When you see kids calling the shots in restaurants and out in public and screaming at their parents, that's called overindulged. Every one of those things that I've listed there, you can't really find an argument. The fact that I string them all together and say them real bluntly, yeah, it sounds harsh, but it's still the truth.
You know, I think, Larry, that you hit on something that's very important for people to know is everybody wants to soft shoe around a real issue rather than just hit them with the truth. You know, and that's what, you know, your title definitely has there. It's your own fault that your children are acting up. It's your own fault that you don't set parameters and rules that allow them to understand how to govern themselves. And it's only a matter of time as they grow up that they realize that's not going to be very effective for them out there in the world.
You know, it's not. And see, I'm not an expert when it comes to dealing with little kids. I'm not. What I am an expert, and I've written 5 bestsellers about, is what it takes to be a successful adult in terms of finances and work ethic and responsibility and honesty and integrity and all those kind of things. So this book, the parenting book, is really about how you can parent in such a way as to create a responsible, productive adult. My guide is that you figure out what you want your child to be like at the age of 35. What are they going to need to know? What skills are they going to have? And we all know what those skills are. And then you work backwards to make sure you're teaching your kid those things.
You know, one of the things I find interesting while reading the book is that you say that telling your kids they're special is a bad thing. Why is that?
Absolutely. And I know that bothers a lot of people. We love to tell our kids that they're special. Well, the truth is they're special to their parents, and they're special to their parents by birthright. They should be special to their parents. But to the rest of the world, sorry, they're just not that special. From the time they walk out the parents' door until the time they die, they're going to be judged on their accomplishments, on how well they do, not on who they are. Your value is not set on who you are. Your value is set on what you're able to accomplish and bring to the table. And when we tell kids that they are special, and it doesn't matter what they do, you're special based on who you are. That's fine as a parent, but you can't let that bleed over into the real world, because that's going to create that sense of entitlement that we've all become victim to right now.
You know, a few examples that come to mind are Lindsay Lohan. Her behavior has been out of control the last few years. But not just her, other celebrities like Paris Hilton, Nicole Richie before she had kids, and just recently Miley Cyrus. Is this a result of bad parenting, or do you believe there are other factors to explain their wild behavior?
Well, you know, those kids, I feel sorry for a kid that is that much, and it's hard to live your life with a camera in your face and the paparazzi in your face all the time. Now, I do think these people brought it on themselves. And I think that parents still can control, and we've seen it with a lot of other celebrity kids who really are pretty in control and have their lives together. So it's not just the celebrity aspect that makes kids go wild and go crazy. It does come into the factor that parents have to be more involved and take more control. You're right there. You know, I get calls all the time. I did one of these kind of shows the other day, and a person called in and said, my child is 17 years old and out of control. And I said, your child was out of control at 17 months old. The fact is, you've probably never been in control. And what we have to understand is when kids are out of control, it's because the parents are not in control.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about, for the listeners out there, some steps that you have where we can actually establish that. Because, you know, for one thing, you brought them into this world. It's your responsibility to show them how to govern themselves. And as you talk about in your book, being able to do that, you must be the role model for them to look up to.
Well, you know, we see a lot of bad role models, and we don't understand how that really does filter down into our kids' brains. For instance, the telephone rings, and the little kid answers and says, Mama, it's for you, and Mama says, just tell him I'm not here. Okay, you've just taught your child it's okay to lie. You may think that that's harmless. It's not harmless. You just told your kid, tell him I'm not here when you're standing right there. You're a liar. You're told your kid to lie for you. It must be okay to lie. Mm-hmm. You know, we tell our kids not to cheat when they go to school. Don't cheat on your tests. Really? 40% of all Americans cheat on their taxes. And so we've got to start putting our money where our mouth is and start being the person we'd like for our child to become, which is a person of honesty and integrity, and you got to tell the truth all the time, not selectively. You got to get up and go to work. You know, we have that going to work thing. You tell your kids, no, you got to go to school. You're pretending to be sick. Well, typically, people take about 10 days a year off where they've lied saying they were sick when they weren't. Come on. A lot of inconsistencies.
Yeah. Larry, you've been around a while, and I just want to know if you've noticed...
Are you saying I'm old?
No,
he's saying that you've matured gracefully.
Yeah, exactly. And I just wanted to know if you've noticed if parenting skills are different today than say when you were a kid.
Oh, absolutely.
I agree with you very much,
absolutely.
Larry. They have changed.
I could no more have gotten by with the crap I see kids get by with today. My dad would have jerked me up by the collar, taken me outside, and as in his words, he'd have worn my butt out. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that spanking is a good thing or spanking is a bad thing. I'm just saying the lines were clear. Mm-hmm. This is acceptable behavior. This is unacceptable behavior. It was communicated to me, and that is a valuable lesson. In fact, that's my first lesson in how to parent, is communicate where the lines are. So kids know these are the boundaries, and when you cross those boundaries, there will be consequences. That's a showing of love for your children, that you love them enough to set boundaries and manage to them.
Larry,
so it has changed.
Yeah, I was going to point out on that I'd like to bring in my own experiences. My kids are in their early 20s, is that as they were young, I said clearly, I want you to express how you feel and who you are. But you need to understand that when you do that you also need to respect the people that you're actually expressing yourself to. Respect their feelings as well. And that goes for me. You're able to go ahead, kind of blow some steam off, but here's the rules. I set the rules in place. And, you hear parents, I'm counting to 1, and if you don't get this done, I just simply say, you now have a warning. You're starting to cross over the barrier. I rarely had to do anything after that. They got it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's because you had to enforce it one time.
Exactly. One time.
You enforce it one time.
I'll see parents out there counting to 10, and I'm like, they're just working you to death.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Where if you went ahead and enforced it one time, you wouldn't have to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Once my dad enforced his rules once, I went, I'd probably be pretty stupid to do this again. I don't think I'm going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
The pain of consequences is a great teacher.
Now, Larry, let's talk about discipline, because this is such, at times, a skewed subject, especially with all the books out there about parenting. But let's talk about what discipline is and how it should be used effectively.
Okay, well, I draw a distinction between discipline and punishment.
Mm-hmm.
I think discipline is setting a code of conduct that says this is how we act, this is how we behave, these are the rules. And those codes of conduct, those disciplines, are rarely established in homes these days. It's what we've just been talking about. It was very clear in my house this was how we would behave. And when we went out, I was communicated to, this is how you'll behave in this situation. Those are disciplines. And it's because we don't set up those disciplines, don't communicate them, don't educate our kids as to what they are and how to do the things we're telling them to do, that we end up punishing. Way too much time is spent on punishment. 90% of the typical parent's time is spent punishing their child, when it ought to be 10% of the time is punishment. 90% is communicating, educating, establishing disciplines, being involved with them so they know how to behave and act and what they need to learn. If you do the first part right, you don't have to spend much time punishing.
Sometimes parents turn to medicine to fix what they are too lazy to deal with when their child is acting out of control. Is this a good solution?
Well, I would never go to a doctor that when I went in and said, listen, this doesn't work right on me, where the very first thing out of my mouth was medicine. I'd like for them to talk to me about lifestyle and other choices first. And just the same thing applies when we medicate our kids. Medicine should never be the very first solution to a problem. And we have turned to medicine simply because we are too lazy to do what it took. When I was a kid, I was hyperactive and I was bouncing off the walls and I was loud, just like I am now, and opinionated and all those kind of things. And I didn't always behave perfectly in school. And that was handled in my house by parents who were involved enough that when I came home, they put me at the chair and said, you will sit your skinny butt in that chair till your homework's done, and I'm going to stand here to make sure it gets done. I didn't get medicated to deal with it. I got parented to deal with it. And that's what we're not doing these days, is putting in the time and the effort. Instead, we throw money at the problem and our laziness at the problem, which means we typically medicate the problem.
Right. Also, in your opinion, what do you think makes good parenting skills?
What do I think makes good parenting skills?
Yeah.
It really comes down, there's lots of ways to get things done. My 5 basics of parenting, as I said, are communication. Communicate to your kids you love them unconditionally. They are yours. You love them. Your love is never up for grabs, but your approval is. Approval is based on what they do and their actions. So communicate that to them. Communicate what you expect from them. Communicate what the consequences of not giving you what you expect from them, those consequences are. Those communication tools really are so important. Then you have to be involved. And involvement's really the second step in parenting, in my opinion. Not just, and we sadly at this point have come to the place in our society where we think sitting on the couch watching television with our kids is involved. and it's not. You got to know who they are, who they play with, know their friends, know what they're doing. I mean, really involved in your child's life. Not to the point that you become a helicopter parent and hover them over them all the time, but the fact that you know who they are and know what's going on. And then you have to educate. It's up to you to educate your child and make sure that they are learning what they need to do in order to be responsible, productive, contributing members of society. Then you establish those disciplines I talked about, and then when all that goes wrong, you resort to some sort of punishment, some sort of enforcement of the consequences, whatever you choose those enforcements to be.
What I really enjoy is just recently on our program we were talking with Jim Fay of the Love and Logic Institute, and he talks about how you give your children choices. And the reason is that a child needs to know that they're going to make a choice and that there's going to be a consequence, much as of what you've been talking about here. But it's also allowing them to make responsible choices as well, and the way they do that is, how do you feel about the consequences based on the choice that you've made? And allowing them to make those mistakes that help them grow and make better decisions, especially at a time when a child starts approaching junior high and high school. And this is where the peer pressures of smoking, doing drugs, drinking, and things like that come into play. That becomes a real awesome task for a kid to navigate through that world. But as you're talking about here, if you instill the fact that they can actually come and talk to you about these things. That was the one thing I used to do with my children personally, and I've seen other parents do the same. When they got done with school, I might take them out to a Dairy Queen for an ice cream cone, and the whole reason is I would sit there and say, tell me about your day. And I would open up the door for them to be able to talk to me about anything they wanted to, and over time, as a result, they would tell me just about anything, and it was really quite amazing how well that worked and how enjoyable it was to bond with them that way.
Well, you instill trust by encouraging that kind of open communication. Trust where you're letting them express who they are and what their decisions have been, and not judging them for who they are, but just offering opinions on their actions and explaining the consequences. That establishes trust. I mean, I have two sons, grown men now who are very responsible, but, they were your typical idiot kids from time to time. They were boys, and they did stupid stuff as teenagers. And I always said, you can tell me anything in the world. You may get in trouble for it later, but you can come to me with any problem, and we'll deal with it. Mm-hmm. But always feel free to come to me and openly communicate about what's going on. And they would come to me, just as you said, and tell me stuff. Oh, my goodness. But we dealt with it, and they would deal with the consequences later on. But they were always, they trusted me enough to be able to say anything they wanted to me.
Mm-hmm. Larry, I just wanted to know, what is the goal with this book? Are you trying to make parents feel uncomfortable or think twice about their parenting skills, or is it a motivational tool to get parents to care better for their kids?
Some of all of that. I want parents to be uncomfortable. I try in my life and what I do for a living to make everybody uncomfortable. We only change from being uncomfortable, not from being comfortable. And there are too many speakers and writers out there who want you to feel good about things. That never does one bit of good. I don't think we change when we feel good about the way things are. We change when we get uncomfortable with the way things are. So the goal of all my titles, I mean, when you write books called People Are Idiots and I Can Prove It and You're Broke Because You Want to Be and Shut Up, Stop Whining, Get a Life, those kind of titles, they do get people's attention and they make them uncomfortable. That's my number one intent, make people uncomfortable. Then it's also to provide some tools. It doesn't do any good to tear people down if you don't give them a plan to build themselves back up. And my books are full of action plans and lots of places they can fill in the blanks to sort of figure out how they're doing and what they could be doing differently. And then I offer suggestions and tips on how they could actually do those things and teach their kids the kind of things they're going to need in order to be successful adults. Again, the goal of parenting, there's only one goal. It's independence. Your goal is you want to get rid of your kid. You don't want a 35-year-old who's still living in his bedroom and you're paying his insurance and buying his groceries. If that happens, you're a lousy parent. And so when your goal is independence, you have to understand what's it going to take to be independent and teach those things.
Mm-hmm. In fact, that's funny because as I was growing up, and I don't know if it was like this for you, Larry, but the message communicated to me is, I was just expected by the time I was 18 years old that it was time for me to move out of the house. And it certainly puts a certain amount of thought as you're growing up is, what in the hell am I going to do when I turn 18? Kind of a thing. But I watch a lot of kids with, as you were saying earlier in the program, with this grand sense of entitlement. Well, I'm going to college, so since I'm doing that, my parents are going to, pay the way for me to stay at home. And there was one case where there was a guy who had been in college for something like 15 years, and as his dad stated, it seems that he's going in there and he's studying more and more about nothing. And I said, but you're flipping the bill. Was there a time that you wanted him to apply this knowledge, or is this going to keep on going?
Well, and I have some friends who have a 30-year-old son, and I keep saying, why does he live in your house? And they say, well, he's still going to school. I say, he's been going to school for 30 years. It's time for him to move out. But sadly, we're not reinforcing that in society. We've just changed the law, in fact, that, now your insurance companies have to cover dependent children until they're 27.
Oh, my goodness.
Why do you have 27-year-old dependent children?
Mm-hmm.
Your goal should be independence, like you said, and you can set the date, but pretty much after you're able to legally drink and vote, you ought to be gone. If you're old enough to go fight and die for your country, you're old enough to have your own apartment. Move.
Do you think it's ever too late to develop better parenting skills?
No, I don't. I think even if your kids are grown and have kids of their own, you can still continue to work on your parenting skills, especially in the area of communication. I mean, you obviously can't discipline and punish and all those kind of things, but you can always learn to communicate better, and that's one of the things that you can always improve on. Now, if you got kids that, teenagers, and you're trying to go back, I'm telling you, it's hard sometimes to go back. The do-overs are tough when it comes to parenting. You can't undo some of the damage that's been done, but it can always get better.
And also,
go ahead, Devin.
Would you consider this book to be read by a particular type of parent, or should this be read by all parents?
Well, as the guy who wrote the book and would like to sell a lot of copies, I think everybody ought to read it.
We don't write books just for a genre. We write them for everybody.
That's right. But, I do think there's something in here every parent could learn from. And really, there are some key issues in the book. I did a survey among my fan base, and, I've got 15 or 1,000 followers on Facebook and another 30,000 who sign up for my e-zines and so forth. And I did a study saying, what was the one thing you wish your parents had taught you that they didn't? 99% of the responses, which is pretty much an overwhelming majority, said that they wish their parents had taught them more about money. I've spent the last 5 or 6 years of my life being a personal finance guy since I had my show on A&E and so forth. And that really hit home to me. We're doing a lousy job teaching our kids about money. You can see that by the horrible financial situation that most young adults are in right now. And so there's a lot of stuff in this book, if nothing else worked for you, a lot of tips on how to teach your kids about money from the time they're, a couple of years old until it's time for them to move out. Just good money tips. And if they didn't read it for any other reason, that'd be a way to do it.
Well, I absolutely agree with that, especially as not too long ago, flipping up on the Yahoo page as I was about to check email, and all of a sudden the Kardashian girls were going to release their own Kardashian card. And I thought, well, wait a minute. I thought these were just girls that like to look hot, do their own reality show. What in the hell do they know about finance? And their whole attitude is they felt that this was going to help young people to learn how to manage money better. Well, I wonder if you're going to tell them about all the little hidden fees that's going to be attached to this card, and they end up going broke with the hard-earned money that they got from a Burger King. And all of a sudden, from my understanding, they've pulled this card off. But just think of how you've got celebrity. You talk about this in your book, how celebrities and even athletes are out there breaking laws, thinking they're above the law, and that we have children because they're basically latchkey kids. They sit on the couch with their parents or they play video games. We'll follow that and then wonder, how did I get myself into this mess in the first place?
Absolutely. And I saw the deal about the Kardashian card. It was a horrible idea. I tried to get a Larry Wingate charge card, and it was printed all across. It was my finger pointing at you. It says, don't use this. And then the credit card company wouldn't go for it afterwards. That's a true story.
Either that or you have a lot of fingers pointing exactly at all the hidden fees that you have with your card is what it is there. A very interesting book. I just think we're in a day and age, and I've seen this actually over the last 25 years. You know, there's a slew of books out there from people telling you how to parent. And it seemed the more that I would read the titles and look through and see what they had to say, the more off base of common sense and common parenting they were getting. It's like everybody was turning into a pop psychologist.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know, kids, Magic Johnson to me actually said it probably the best when it came to kids. He says, kids, their wants are actually pretty simple. The first thing they really want is just some of your time. And I thought the genius just in that alone, if you just give them some of your time, you know, as much as you can give them, just give that to them. They want to be heard, you know.
Yep.
You give children those two things, parenting really becomes quite easy in a lot of ways.
It really does. And, you know, if you've looked at my book, there's no pop psychology there. It's
Not at all.
Good old-fashioned common sense. Love your kid. Love them enough to parent them, which means sometimes they're not going to like it, but you do it because you love them enough to make sure that you're teaching them the lessons they're going to need to learn in order that when they are independent, they know how to be successful, financially secure, honest, good workers, common sense people that you can be proud of. That's it. It's just old-fashioned parenting. Teach them the right stuff.
Any final thoughts from you, Devin?
You know, while Larry was talking, I just wanted to know, Larry, if you've ever witnessed a kid acting out of control in public, and have you walked up to their parent and said, you know, you kind of suck as a parent?
You know, I haven't done that and just said you suck at it. I've done it in other areas of life, but I did walk up to some people. I was in an airport, and they were just so out of control, and I happened to have a book in my briefcase, and I pulled it out, walked up and said, I think you can use this, and turned around and walked off.
Yeah, what about any other tips or advice you'd like to offer for our listeners?
You know, parenting is really pretty simple, as we just discussed here. It's not that hard. Love your kid, communicate with your kid, be involved in what they've got going on in their life, and teach them that they can trust you so they'll talk to you and that you'll listen to them. And don't be afraid to impose consequences. And remember, if they're teenagers, my one word of advice for dealing with teenagers, my one idea dealing with teenagers, they'll grow out of it. And sometimes the best thing you can do with a teenager is remember they will grow out of it. And that's about it. You know, parenting's not that tough.
Larry, if you can, give out a website people can find out more about this.
Just go to Larry Winget, LarryWinget.com. You'll see videos of me. I'm on television 2 or 3 times a week doing interviews about this stuff and all kinds of stuff. You can look at all the books and see synopsis of it. There's lots of video on there. You can see some video of me on stage of what I do and so forth. So just go to LarryWinget.com. There's also a way to get some free stuff on there, so go there. Larry
Winget, thank you for joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program. It's always
My
a pleasure to know common sense is still out there somewhere. We also want to thank you, the listeners, and also you, Devin Dakota, for being in the co-host seat there. And be sure to visit us at our website, which is beyond50radio.com, the number 50, 50. Sign up for our free weekly e-newsletter. I'm Daniel Davis, along with Devin Dakota. Thank you for joining us. And remember, live your day past halfway.